This is going to be a follow-up to my last video that was about game preservation. And so if you want to watch that one first, that'll help with some of these questions. But you can dive into this too. And first of all, I want to thank everybody for the conversation here, because when I originally created this and started doing these conversations, I wanted them to be conversations. I'm not a developer that tells you to go do this and we all agree and this is it, right? That's a lot less interesting. These are interesting conversations. And so if you took the time to write something up, and some people wrote some really nice stuff up, I'm going to take the time to respond to it. And in the written word is kind of lost. And since a lot of people are talking about the same kind of things, I wanted to kind of cover this. And so if I don't respond to yours exactly, hopefully I've covered what you were talking about. And again, if you don't care about any of this, well, hey, that's cool too. So I want to start though with, hey, I think the framing of this is they hate modern games is a bad take. And I want to say, no, that is core to why I made the video, because most games are already preserved. Most games that you play are already preserved, they already can be played again, can already happen. That is most games, right? This goes with somebody had said, oh, well, you're saying that games can't be good with all these back-end systems. No. I'm purposely only talking about those games because preservation already exists for all these other games. How's this? This is an Amiga emulator. A friend made this for me and put all my Amiga games on it because I was lamenting having to lug down my Amiga. Play them all. Tiny, right? I'm a fan of all this, and I'm a fan of preservation. And again, if you missed the first one, I've actually paid to make sure my game can be preserved. But regulation in this is fraught with problems that people aren't thinking about. And some of that is, so again, I hate to call stuff out, and this way I'm not saying names because actually I really appreciate it, and I thought there were a lot of thoughtful responses, but one of these is Ross Scott is explicitly saying he isn't the one who should be heading this battle. Okay, but think about it this way. What if there's some dude standing in a gas station that's on fire and burning, and he is standing on top of the gas pumps, and he's going, those firemen won't come stand here. I'm the only one who'll stand here. Come here, come here. Do you think maybe he's the only one standing there because he doesn't understand that those gas pumps can explode? That is much with this, because again, most games are already preserved. Most games already can be backed up if they're local on you. And even if they're connected, we'll get into it, there's a bunch of fan stuff that will make it work. Again, these are decades old games I'm playing here. Most of this already exists. The only thing Ross is complaining about is a game he doesn't want to play, who has never played, but has back-end services, okay? And that is, to me, a bad faith argument. So let's jump right into this. One of the people says their company's helping Bossa with the develop Lost Skies, which looks really cool. It's a successor, kind of spiritual successor to World Adrift, and World Adrift went under, and you can't play it anymore because of Improbable. Improbable is its own mess. Oh, Herman. But say hi to Enrique, and then ask him, would he have rather have Worlds Adrift preserved or found a fan base that played it? Because that's kind of the tension, is you want to find enough people to play your game so that it stays on, and then you have a long tail. And then if you have people playing it, you're going to keep buying it. Normally, if you have people playing it, you're going to have people buying it because people are going to keep buying it to play with their friends or whatever. Even if it's a single player game, hey, my friend's playing this, so I'm going to play it. That's the long tail of games, and you want to be a part of that, and you want to keep that going. And so if they're saying this during development, they're taking care to make sure that it can go offline. And the same thing that I did, right? Yes. And again, I'm not against that. I am totally for that. But equally, if the choice is make the game better or make sure the game can be preserved, you should always make the choice to make the game better. You should, because nobody's going to care about the game that you just preserved then, right? And then this also kind of comes into kind of the regulation of like only being about big companies and not small companies. But you forget a really important question. When do you enforce this? Because if somebody says, what is it? Imagine how much it would suck to be compelled to do a whole bunch of work to preserve a game that nobody plays. Because that's the question is, let's say you're a lethal company. And okay, you're a small company. You're not underneath these set of regulations, right? But now you're a giant company. You blew up. Do you have to regulate it now? Do you have to now spend time making sure that it can be played offline. And again, this means not just making sure the build can be played offline, but testing it. You have to test it at every time you do an update, because games get updated all the time. Like, right? Like, when does this cross over to this thing? Or do you wait until the company goes under, until they're going to close down, and you're like, well, this has got to be playable. But nobody's there. Nobody's has money to go do that. And then there's we'll just release the source code. And again, we've talked about how you can't just release the source code and how you shouldn't just release the source code, especially if you're a company. And then people on Reddit, this is why, like, these conversations, like, I sound like I'm poo-pooing people on Reddit. People on Reddit are smart. We're like, well, if it's just about small companies, and when you close down a company and not a game, Ubisoft's just going to spin up a company every time there's a game being made. Now, yeah, companies are devious. They'll do stuff like that, right? And again, you don't want that. I want actual game preservation where it can happen. So how do you affect that, right? Well, one really simple way is think and look at history. You do that on TV shows by going to the networks and saying, hey, come on, man, we love this. We want another season. That's how other seasons of TV shows have happened. And it's also like going to regulators who have no vested interest in it and no care, and having to get them to have a care. And then, like, it's just blah, blah, blah. Go to Ubisoft. Go have someone said that boycotts don't work. Oh, hell yeah, boycotts work. Real boycotts work. Boycott Ubisoft. Say, hey, we want to be able to not play games that we don't want to play, that we weren't going to buy. I mean, that is your cheer, right? But sure, right? I mean, I'd pick a better one. I play Tom Clancy Wildlands all the time. That's like a decade-old game from Ubisoft, right? But protest Ubisoft. That's who's gonna change your mind. That's who's gonna change their mind. Not regulators. Regulators are just gonna have a bunch of people hit along the way. And then someone else was talking about, like, Star Wars and trying to find a version of the game to play. Yes, or to watch. A version of the movie to watch. Excuse me. Yeah. So that is one of the things on Reddit. Again, is people were talking about, like, each version they need to go back to, so you don't have the CSGO CS2 thing. But that's also problematic, because as somebody who works on games, there's a reason why every one of your games now has on at the bottom the version number, because I've had to track down bugs for people who just, oh yeah, I don't update the game. Yeah, so that's why you couldn't connect to everybody, dude. Like, rock on. But, like, you would not believe the amount of time at scale that you spend on stupid stuff like that. So no, people don't want to have a bunch of versions out there kind of floating around. And then someone else was saying about a publisher doing this to move to the next game. Think about the number of companies that are one game. I'd have a friend who's starting a new game who's just going to name his company the same as the game, because the reality is, if you have a hit game, it's so hard to do. You want to just be nothing but that game, right? Project Zomboid's a great example. Those guys roughed it out. They've got this giant hit. Are they going to come out with a second game? Sure, maybe sometime, but, like, Project Zomboid just keeps going. Is that playable offline? Maybe. I don't know. We played on a server. I guess, yeah, it must be. But right, like, you're not going to give up the hit game. So I think that covers the big bulk of the things. And I know people were asking this in good faith and trying to have a conversation, so I don't mean to poo-poo any of that. And it's hard, right? Because, again, I think we are only talking about the only games not being preserved now are those games. For some persons who talked about Henry Rollins, actually, I read his books of poetry when they first came out. That was, I think, when I realized he was something more than just what he was. That was kind of interesting. I did mention my favorite movie. I shouldn't mention my favorite movie, because I don't like, I have movies that I like. And Leolo is a French-Canadian movie that's not available anywhere. That I really like. I think if I had held the gun to my head, my favorite movie would be a movie called After Our Summer Hours. It's a French movie. Just speaks to me of growing old and some of the things I think about. But boycotts do work. And a lot of this is kind of around that, or about not understanding the complexity of the game servers, because you can remove voice. And yeah, you can. I'm just not going to keep going on about how complex the back end of game servers are. Yeah, and again, I really would like to see games preserved. I think, but just doing it through regulation is not the way to do it, which is a weird thing, because I am normally the regulation guy. But this is just a bad place for it, where you consumers can have a vote and can have action here. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. I'll answer if I didn't. You can ask it again in this one, and I'll follow up in text. I just kind of wanted to get kind of the gist of the ones that were kind of being asked a lot or being talked about a lot. Thanks.